0 to 60 times down near like 5 seconds flat or so. I mean, this thing will scoot. So that's something we can see in the future is different uses for this technology. Now here is the Atkinson cycle engine. Look when it was developed, 1881. It's been around for a long time. The trouble is, because of delaying this intake valve to create a higher expansion ratio, it increases efficiency at the expense of power. So as an efficient engine, it didn't make any power. Well, back when he did that, we didn't have the electronic technology we had. There was no way to take advantage of it. So here we use that style motor that's very efficient with an electric motor to help compensate for the loss of power. Or in Ford's case, we turbocharge it. You know, the EcoBoost, that's an Atkinson cycle engine with a couple turbos on it. So here we pile it up with an electric motor so that it can, you know, have the power that we Americans demand out of our cars. There's your conventional engine. You know, see the 18 inches of vacuum, normal. On the Atkinson cycle, we have a lot less intake vacuum because they leave an intake valve open. So as this piston comes up on the compression stroke, it's helping push air into the other cylinder to help with pumping losses. But by doing that, we also get a loss of power that we can get out of this cylinder because our compression, you know, event is not near as long. So even though it's efficient, it doesn't make a lot of power. Series parallel system is your typical Prius. You know, the motor generator 2 can drive the transmission by itself or add the internal combustion in. Motor generator 1 is the generator to charge up the batteries. Notice the size difference between the two of them. That's your hybrid synergy drive that Toyota has. Now this is, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is how they put it together. Planetary gear set in the middle. Gas engine connected to the carrier. The electric motor is connected to the ring gear. And the generator is connected to the sun gear. So if we have the gas engine running at 5,000 RPM and we got this running at 3,000 RPM, the computer controls the generator to control the gear ratio given out by the planetary gear set, which then goes into the transaxle. So there is an infinite combinations of how the computer can splice the gas engine and electric engine together or shut one off or the other. It's in complete control of that thing. Now the battery packs, we don't spend a lot of time on this, just kind of showing some of the different ones. You know, with the Prius originally, you know, people are always worried about the price of a battery pack. Well, you could replace individual cells. So instead of $5,000, they were like $360 a piece if you only had 1 or 2 cells that failed. A lot of the other ones, now here's the little battery that's underneath the seat. A couple little things technology-wise. Absorbed glass mat, and it's a lead calcium battery. So that it doesn't give off a lot of hydrogen gas inside the car, which would be bad because it's in the passenger compartment. And very low amperage, 3.5 amps. You cannot put this in on a battery charger. A lot of guys say what they do, instead of buying expensive chargers, to take their jump pack and hook the jump pack to it and then plug the jump pack into the wall. So the charger for the jump pack is actually charging that battery. And all it needs to do is turn on the electronics. You know, all it has to do is turn the computers on, make everybody wake up, and then the big batteries in the back do everything else. So this is really not a battery in the terms we normally think of them. Here's the battery pack in Mariner, Moss Tribute, Ford, Escape on that. Come on, I'm going to change. Now this is something, you know, I know, temper battery. This is, we've always had the black. But now we've got some new colors. The orange, everybody knew about that right away. As soon as we came out with these cars, orange, stay away from orange. They knew that. High voltage, stay away. Yellow, they're saying is 60 volts, which I'm not quite sure what we'll see that on, because yellow, I always thought it was airbag wiring. Remember that always the airbag is in yellow. And then blue is a new one, 42 volts. And on the mild hybrids, those cables that run the 42 volts should be wrapped in the blue shrinky-dink wrap running around there, so to identify, so you know that that's a little bit higher. You know, 42 volts isn't always enough to shock a human. It depends on your internal resistance, but you don't want to try. I don't want to find out. Safety equipment. We got some of that over here. Pass it around here. Yeah, I mean, safety glasses, I'm sure you guys have seen before. These gloves are a little bit new. These are the Class O gloves for insulation when working with the high voltage. Then you put a leather glove over the top of that to protect it, because you don't want to poke a hole in that with something you're working on. So that insulation, the leather glove, protects that glove. And periodically, you want to check them for leaks. Let's back up to this one here. Don't start working on these things with dirty hands. No, this is not a burned hand, it's a dirty hand. But there's a ring on here, and I know everybody in here has had some technician that's grounded his ring out against a starter. So you don't want to do that with 300, 400 volts, do you? Items in your pocket that could fall down and get into these things. I mean, it's not like it's going to drop onto a battery and short out, but say what if you dropped a pocket screwdriver down beside there and then you're trying to wiggle the battery pack and you set it back down on top of it and it pokes a hole. I mean, these things could happen, so you want to use some caution. I don't know about guys with piercings, that could come into that too. The Class O and the leather gloves. Side shields on your eyeglasses. Periodically, they suggest that you blow them up to look for leaks in them. You can blow it up, stick it in the water, and see if any bubbles. Any leaks, they gotta go. And some of these have expiration dates on them too. I know some of the initial ones, which like 6 months, you had to throw them away. But they have better ones out now. Here, Toyota has a pair they guarantee for 6 years. So it just depends on what you're buying. They're not terribly expensive, but you'd want good quality equipment or something like that. Meters. You need a Class 3 meter. Now, of course, Fluky is going to be one of those that's rated for Cat 3, 1,000 volts. But how many of our guys have got the Harbor Freight $8 meter in their box? That would be a no-no. The second part of that is probably, I think, the more important part, is the leads. What are your fingers on? Your fingers are holding the leads. And to heck with the meter, I want to make sure I have Cat 3 leads in my hand so I don't get zapped. You know, on the meter I can replace my finger. So the leads are important because sometimes you buy a nice meter that you can cheap leads with it. So you got to make sure you got the right ones. High voltage shut-off devices. Capacitors have to be given time to shut off. You know, because they're always there to store some electricity. You sure don't want to short out a capacitor. We're showing some of the way some of these cars get shut off. The Prius, second generation, down the back of the trunk, it's real hard to get to in the back of there. And they always recommend to use the rubber gloves to turn these things off, because you never know if there's some kind of a fault in the system. Okay, this is the escape in the mirror. It's in the trunk in the back. Behind the back seat on the Civic and the Accord hybrids, I've got one down in St. Louis, the guy's working on right now with a cracked head on it. He wanted to make sure he disabled that before he got into the system. The green key that GM uses to shut their system. Now it's only a 42 volt system, but notice it does have a master shutoff key on it. Saturn View. I didn't even know they made a Chevy Malibu hybrid. I've never seen one of those. Yeah, I've not seen one. Yeah. Now this is kind of interesting. Never push a hybrid. What do you think? That generator in there, if you start spinning it, it starts generating electricity. So, I mean, I think most of the record drivers know they put these hybrids on a rollback. I hope none of them would tow them on the ground. But if it's at your shop and it's outside, you need to push it inside. And then you still should be able to do that just fine. The caution they're saying now is put somebody in the driver's seat. Just in case that you push it, it decides to start on its own. You know, so put somebody in the driver's seat, you're going to push it into your shop. Okay, so maintaining and servicing. This one here, the reason they put this in here is because so many of our guys are so good at kicking the rack underneath there, and they know where to kick the rack to raise the car. But these guys are a little different. You sure as heck, if somebody maybe had gotten these orange cables out of their holder, and one of those is hanging down, and you pinch that when you're lifting it, that's going to be a real pretty show when all them sparks go flying everywhere. So, yeah, that would be a bad thing. So tell them to use just a little bit of caution on that kind of thing. Normal maintenance service items. Now, a caution on a second one. The internal combustion drivability work. That's going to depend upon the scan tools and the expertise your guys have. The first one, the first generation Prius, I was at a Toyota school. And the Toyota scanner would not start that gas engine. The only way you could start it was to turn the AC on max AC, and then it would start the gas engine to run the compressor. But I had no command I could force that thing to start. Now they've fixed that since then, but it depends. I mean, which version of Genesis do you have? You know, 4.0, 5, what do you have? That could affect that. But the brake work, You know, most of the tires, exhaust, bulbs, windshield, that stuff's all still the same. Although a little funny note I saw on the exhaust was that a little note I found said nobody is making an aftermarket converter for the first generation Prius. And they're the ones coming up on 10 years old now. Right now there's no aftermarket makes one for that. So I'm like, that's not good. Oil change precautions. This is one place where we really can't shortcut what the manufacturers say, because these engines aren't like a regular engine. We don't know when they run. We don't know how often they run, how long, and what kind of load's on them. So you need to stay with what the manufacturers recognize. This one here is a neat little thing, and it applies to some of the other cars besides the hybrids. Smart keys. You know, getting them away from the car. Some of the guys are taking them out and putting them on the service manager's desk. They make a little box. It's like a kryptonite box. You put the key inside there, put the top on it, it keeps the key from communicating with the car to make sure it doesn't start while you've got the oil drained out of it. Also, too, if you're looking for a drain on the system, you can't get the computers to go to sleep with that keys anywhere near the car. So that's something where it's kind of new you might want to be looking into. Honda service, you know, pretty straightforward. Cooling system, you know, electric power assist. Putting the right weight motor oil is essential in these things. Now, as far as I've not heard any good answers about what kind of mileage you're going to put on that sticker on the windshield. You shouldn't be putting 3,000 on a hybrid engine using this stuff, but what do you put? Because you don't know how often the engine runs. So that comes to be a little bit of an issue. Oop, back up on here. The Prius cooling system service. Remember, here you got one car with two cooling systems. Sounds good to me. I got one car in shop. I get two drain fills. One for the engine, one for the inverter. There's two completely separate cooling systems, two radiators in that thing. And then everything else is pretty well standard. A lot of these cars will use a CVT transmission of some kind. This is new. AC service, you have to use a non-conductive oil, not your plain old PAG. You've got to use a non-conductive oil on these compressors because of the high voltage that's inside them. So that's something to bear in mind. Here's the Toyota high voltage compressor. It runs at 201 volts. Notice it has the orange cable on it. Say you've been working on this car and you had the head off of it and somebody dropped the head on that wiring harness and now it's smashed. Is it any good still? It's at 201 volts and I don't want to find out by air. They make this little guy. This is a insulation tester. It tests either 250, 500, or 1,000 volts. So you take the harness and you hook this end to end, hit the button, and it sends high voltage through it and it checks the insulation to see if the insulation is still valid to be able to withstand the higher voltages.